and thank you for joining us today. I'm here with Mark Black, one of our Africa specialists who uh, just returned from Tanzania, and he's going to be sharing a lot of that knowledge with you. And at the end, please pop if you have questions when we're done, um, please pop your questions into the answer box and in the question box, and we'll be happy to answer those. So this uh, webinar is being recorded. It will be housed on our travel agent portal on flysaavacations.com. So we're going to go ahead and get started, and thank you for joining us today. So this is all about Explore Tanzania with South African Airways Vacations. And of course, here's Mark, lovely smiling face, always ready to help travel agents with their clients in planning that perfect Africa itinerary. So a little bit about us. We're located in Tucson, Arizona. Our president of SAA Vacations actually is from South Africa, and he married a young lady from Tucson. And of course, 3 children later, we're all here in Tucson. We've been operating the program since January 1st, 2011. And also, like most airline branded programs, um, we're operated by Destination Southern Africa, or DSA Vacations, which is the parent company running the actual program. And of course, flights are always included, but just an addendum to that. Should your clients have frequent flyer miles or choose to fly on another carrier, we can do land only. So just keep that in mind should you have a client that wants to use those frequent flyer miles. Of course, all flights, when we do a quotation, are included with the international and also the internal flights in the itineraries. South African Airways is a Star Alliance member, so we can do many of those additional cities from air add-ons from a number of domestic U.S. cities. And of course, all of our advertised programs include economy air from JFK or another gateway, Washington, D.C. Easy connections to East Africa using the JFK flight. It leaves mid-morning and then, of course, arrives in Johannesburg early the next morning, and then they can easily connect onto Nairobi or to Dar es Salaam. Internal flights, of course, within Africa on SA Express or Airlink, which are code-share partners within Southern Africa. And of course, taxes and fees are always included. And if you have a client that would like to travel on premium business class, we can quote on that as well. So you see the configuration of the South African Airways flight on the lower left of your screen. The configuration is 2, 4, and 2, so your client is never more than 1 seat away from the aisle. And of course, we have the live flatbed seats in premium business class. So there's 2 classes of service on South African Airways. There's economy and premium business class. And of course, connecting on to East Africa, again, the JFK flight works best because once they arrive in Johannesburg, they can connect on. The flight from Washington Dulles leaves in the evening and arrives in the late afternoon in Johannesburg, so they would have a forced overnight should they choose that gateway. And of course, the flight times from Johannesburg to Nairobi is 4 hours, a little over 4 hours, and to Dar es Salaam, a little over 3 hours. And now I'm going to turn it over to Mark, and here he is with his newfound friends from Tanzania.
Welcome, everyone, and thanks so much, Cheryl, for that kind introduction. It's difficult to summarize the scope and importance of Tanzania as a safari destination in just a few minutes, but I will do my best to cover all the main regions in Tanzania that are most important from a safari and a cultural perspective. And that image you're seeing there is me and my friends, my Maasai warrior friends in the Tarangire National Park. Africa is huge. It's a huge continent, obviously. There you see in the middle right, circled in blue, Tanzania. It says just below Kenya, and it's that region of Africa we refer to as East Africa in a more general sense. There's a closer view of map of Tanzania. Up in the upper right-hand corner, you see the town, the city of Arusha. From Arusha going clockwise, it's okay. Arusha going clockwise to the left there is Serengeti National Park, the Tarangire, and the Ngorongoro Crater. So that upper section of Tanzania is where the majority of our clients will be traveling for on safari. The experience in Tanzania is virtually all about game viewing and the animal and the safari experience. There you see two big tuskers, we call them, two big bull elephants who are standing at the base of Mount Kilimanjaro, which, by the way, is a little over 19,000 feet in height. Probably the most commonly asked question when it comes to safari in East Africa, Kenya, and or Tanzania, in this case Tanzania, is what about the migration? The Great Migration is an annual clockwise movement of over 1 million wildebeest and their zebra friends in search of food and water. And depending on what time of year it is, the migration is usually in a very specific part of Tanzania. So when we plan our Tanzania itineraries for our clients, a very important part of the conversation is what time of year you're traveling and what camps or lodges we'll be booking for you based on the location of the Great Migration. This is one of the more famous shots that I'm sure everybody has seen some version of, the migration, the crossing of the Mara River by the wildebeest. There you get a good idea of the scope of and the numbers of animals and the river crossing. So we typically will try to include the migration in the itinerary. There's also an important part of the experience there is the culture. Here you see two fellows of the Maasai culture. These are the indigenous folks who live in and around in Tanzania and Serengeti and Ngorongoro and so forth. You see them everywhere, both living their day-to-day life in their villages, working in the camps and lodges, and almost always wearing their traditional and colorful clothing, beadwork, and so forth. See that stick that guy is holding there? Every male Maasai, no matter how old they are, child or adult, has one of those sticks that they use for herding their goats and cows. They also have that long spear with them, and then they have a long sort of machete-like knife in their belt as well. They're really quite an amazing and beautiful people. The other important thing to keep in mind, and something that we talk about a great deal in our conversations of planning these itineraries, is when is the best time to travel. So these are both Kenya and Tanzania are great year-round safari destinations, and again, all about the animals and the Great Migration. But there are very specific rainy and dry season. In Tanzania, the peak season, which is also the dry season there, runs from approximately June through October, when there's little or no rain, and the migration has moved up into the northern sections of Tanzania, of the Serengeti, which, by the way, the very northern tip of the Serengeti Plain, which covers thousands of square miles, about 5% of it extends up into southern Kenya, into its most famous reserve, which is called the Masai Mara Reserve. So June through October, the dry season. There's also a shorter dry season, January and February, very popular, kind of a well-kept secret with regard to the migration. During January and February specifically, the migration typically has moved into the southern Serengeti, which is an area called Ndutu, and that's the calving season when those millions of or a million wildebeest give birth over about a 3-week period. It's quite an amazing spectacle. So we typically will send our clients into the southern Serengeti for at least part of their itinerary during that period. So that's one of the drier sections, and then there is a period called the short rains, November and December, where you might have light afternoon showers. And then the period of the long rains, March, April, May, when you could have sustained downpours. Um, and that's a time of year we typically will probably not be booking as many of our clients. Um, the other part of the conversation that's very important is the type of vehicles we use and the types of accommodations that we stay in. There are essentially two or three types or ways in which you can do your safari in Tanzania. There are scheduled small group departures, meaning you would travel with one or two other safari vehicles on scheduled departures and sets departure times. And those travel overland in the vehicles you see there on the right, which is the classic East Africa style of safari 4x4 vehicle. Or you can do what is called a fly-in safari, where you move from camp to camp on light aircraft charter flights. And then there are private overland tours as well, where it's just you, a private guide, a safari vehicle, and moving from camp to camp, lodge to lodge by road. The types of accommodations vary in size and level of luxury, but essentially it falls into two categories. There are safari lodges, like you see there in the lower left, which is the Ngorongoro Sopa Lodge, actually, where they're a little bit more hotel-like, but definitely have an African safari style to them, and they have larger capacity and tend to be more affordable in the 3 and 4-star range. And then there are the so-called tented camps. There are a couple kinds of tented camps there are mobile camps, which are literally camps that have been set up in specific areas to take advantage of the Great Migration. And those camps will stay in that one location for 2 or 3 months until the migration has moved on. And then they'll move that camp and set it up in another location again near the migration. There are semi-permanent tented camps that are typically a little more luxurious, and those are also very popular. But do keep in mind that the tented camps, no one is actually camping as we understand it. They are relatively luxurious to very luxurious. They have flush toilets, hot and cold running water, showers, comfortable beds, and so forth. So the other thing that's important to talk about is who will be traveling, and those folks or clients who come to East Africa, Tanzania specifically, definitely have a very specific interest in game viewing and seeing animals. It's very popular for both first-time travelers as well as second and third-time travelers who want to go deeper into the safari experience. It can be very appealing to the adventure-seeking traveler because it's very wild and just a vast, beautiful landscape. Great for university and college alumni groups, honeymooners, and multi-generational families. These are the most visited and most popular of the national parks in Tanzania that we typically will include some or all of in an itinerary there. And these are, of course, the Serengeti National Park, which again covers thousands of square miles of both grassland, mountain, and woodlands. There is the Ngorongoro Conservation Area, which is essentially the most popular part of which is a huge crater in which there's a multitude of animals there. Tarangire National Park in the south, which is a gorgeous national park, very popular, particularly during the dry season. Lake Manyara National Park, which is near Ngorongoro, usually on the way to or from Ngorongoro. Lake Manyara is best known for its bird life, its flamingos, and elephant populations. And then, of course, the Kilimanjaro National Park, where hikers and climbers will go to, well, climb Mount Kilimanjaro, which is, again, over 19,000 feet, tallest peak in Africa. So when you arrive in Tanzania, typically you will fly into Mount Kilimanjaro International Airport just outside of the small city of Arusha, which has a population of about a million people. And there you see Arusha highlighted there in the upper right, not far from the Kenya border. One can also fly into Nairobi Jomo Kenyatta International Airport on South African Airways, and then connect onwards just an hour flight to Arusha. And there you see the types of planes that would connect you onwards. We do those travel logistics for our clients all the time. Arriving in Arusha Domestic Airport, there you see a great shot of Arusha Domestic, ARK, airport, and those light aircraft. And then you transfer into Arusha town. And there you see one of the typical local buses and local shops there. Arusha town sits at the base of Mount Meru. It's an elevation of about 4,200 feet. It has a very mild climate. Again, a population of about 1 million people. And normally when people arrive in Arusha on their first night, they're going to overnight on that day. And they will book one of the lodges there or hotels there in Arusha for them. And they might have the opportunity there to do some shopping along with a guide in the town for the various handicrafts, paintings, Maasai blankets, and so forth. It's a very fun experience because Arusha is a little bit more like a third world city compared to Nairobi or some of the other African cities, but it's a beautiful town. People are amazing. It's quite safe, but again, you would do your shopping and traveling around there with a guide. Clients who are going there and that have climbing of Mount Kilimanjaro as part of their itinerary will transfer from Arusha to a little town called Moshi, and that's going to be the base for their Mount Kilimanjaro climb. There's at least 6 different routes to the summit of Kilimanjaro, and that typically is going to take between 6 and 8 days for that climb. Again, it's the highest mountain in Africa, and it is a volcano. Like many of the peaks in Tanzania, those were extinct volcanoes, and it is a beautiful snow-capped peak. Again, great for hiking, climbing, and so forth. There's the summit. Usually the summit approach for Mount Kilimanjaro is started in the middle of the night. And then when you reach the summit, you reach the top at sunrise. It's one of the most glorious sunrises you'll ever see. And then they very quickly start making their way down to the base. Arguably the most famous of the parks in Tanzania and most well known is the Serengeti National Park, as I mentioned earlier. It's thousands of square miles in size. It is basically divided into the southern section, the central and northern Serengeti, and depending on what time of year you go to Tanzania, we will book camps or lodges specifically in either the south, central, or north based on the location of the Great Migration. The fly-in itineraries for the Serengeti will again fly on these light aircraft charter planes, as you see there in that photograph. That was actually our group a few weeks ago getting on our plane, getting ready to head back to Arusha. And again, spans 12,000 square miles. It's kind of hard to wrap your mind around, but it is huge and has and supports enormous numbers of animals. In addition to the Great Migration, there are tremendous amounts of resident game, wildebeest, gazelle, zebra, lion, leopard, hyena, and so forth. um, and of course giraffe. Um, and the plains predator, as we call it, the cheetah. There's a family of cheetah there that we came across one night or one evening on our way to our camp, heading back after a long day on safari. There was a mom and three brothers laying there, just kind of taking a nap. And of course, the male lions. Yes, and that's me heading back to. In fact, I got to tell you the story. We were leaving our camp one morning in the Serengeti, and I'd left my camera in my room, and I went back to my room to get my camera, and standing literally in front of my tent were two huge bull elephants right next to the front door. So I thought better than to try to squeeze between them and get into my room. And so I went back and found our guide, and then we climbed down to the bottom of the tented area and climbed up and snuck up into the back of the room. So that was really there are no fences. Animals come and go as they please. So there's me and my elephant friends. And of course, if you're fortunate, and you will be almost guaranteed in Tanzania, to come across prides of lions, and of course who doesn't love the baby lions, the cubs. And another popular activity in Tanzania and Kenya, particularly in the Serengeti, are the hot air balloon safaris, which are something that is I consider a don't miss experience. Those are sunrise balloon rides, and when they land, you have a champagne breakfast waiting for you. Yeah, and the balloon rides are usually around $500 or $600 per person. They are expensive, but worth every cent. Beautiful sunset from one of our tented camps over the Serengeti Plain. A male and female lion. They sleep 22 hours a day, so they're often laying down under a tree. Then we come to Lake Manyara National Park, which is usually included in a Tanzania circuit. This is one of the very famous of the national parks there, sitting below the Great Rift, what we call the Great Rift Valley, and the big escarpment. It's a beautiful lake known for its bird life, tree climbing lions, and elephant populations, hippo, rhino, and so forth. And of course, the flamingos. Our little friend there of the primate variety. So when you leave Lake Manyara and start making your way towards the Ngorongoro crater, you travel through an area called the Ngorongoro Highlands, which is a thickly forested, just beautiful area that's incredibly lush. And of course, it's not fenced, and there is wildlife everywhere. And so here we came across this small family of elephants. There's the flamingos at Lake Manyara. There's a good example of the East Africa style of safari vehicles, where the roof of the vehicle pops up and you look out through the top. That's the typical style for East Africa, and of course the hippos. Catching one that's doing the big yawn is always a favorite for photographers. There's a lilac-breasted roller that's one of the many really beautiful and exotic birds we see there and all over Tanzania. And then we come to the south to Tarangire National Park, gorgeous national park, just about a 2.5-hour road transfer from Arusha. Most popular during the dry season, but we book it year-round, particularly not only in the dry season, but in January and February. Has some of the highest populations of resident game of any park in Africa. And then during the January-February period, the migration has moved into that southern section too, so it's likely you'll experience that as well. And it has a variety of both tented and lodge-type accommodation. Tarangire Treetops is one of the more unique of the properties there, where the rooms have literally been built into the baobab trees. That's The one plant species that Tarangire is most famous for are the baobab trees, and if you've never seen one, they're quite remarkable. There we are entering the reception for the lodge. Of course, they're always there with a big smile waiting for you. So there is one of the rooms at Tarangire Treetops that's literally built around one of the baobab trees. And this one, if you see in the upper left of that room there, and this is a tented room, by the way, you see the branch of that tree literally poking out through the screen of the room, and it runs through the interior of the room. There is the Tarangire tented room. Again, they're luxurious. Nobody is roughing it. They're totally safe. Hot and cold running water, flush toilets, um, fully inclusive meals. There's the boma during the day. That's lit up with a fire at night. It's one of the classic eating, dining styles in Africa. Three different shots of the interior of the rooms there and of the lounge area. There you see the shower and toilet, the bedroom, which always has a balcony looking out over the park, and then a little snippet there in the lower right of the part of the lounge area of the main lodge. And of course, the staff are always there to greet you with a smile, with a drink, and one of the one of the many popular local beers, in this case the Serengeti, of course. On one of our last days, coming out of Tarangire, we came across a pride of 24 lions, just hanging out one morning on the rocks. It was quite an experience. Here's an example of a mobile tented camp of the 5-star variety. This is moving in, walking into the main entrance of the main lounge of the lodge there. Again, these are canvas tented camps, but they're very, very luxurious. Here is a 4-star version of the same thing. Again, very spacious, very luxurious. You see to the middle left, behind the tent there, and that's one room, by the way. There's a solar panel with a big drum. That's where the hot water comes from, and each tent has one of those. So they're really quite luxurious. There's the interior of one of the other 4-star tented camps that we stayed in. They're really quite lovely and comfortable. And heading back after a long day on safari, there's our safari vehicle, sunset over the Serengeti. It's really quite an amazing landscape. There you see the roads that you'll take, your clients will take on their game drives. They can be a little rough at times for sure, but the landscape is pristine. It's beautiful. This was late May, early June, just after the short rains, and so the landscape was still fairly green. The grass is quite high because the migration had not quite arrived. It was just starting to come in. We caught the edge of the migration, and so the wildebeest and zebra were starting to show up in larger numbers. This was the beginning of a herd that came marching through that numbered in the thousands, actually. And then we come to one of the more famous locations in Tanzania that's most well known as the Ngorongoro Conservation Area. Again, this crater, literally a crater that is a national park and conservation area now. There's the entrance to the park. It's very well protected with park rangers, just like you'd see in a park here in the U.S. So you drive up to the park entrance there, and the guide who you're with goes in and fills out various paperwork while you wait and go have a coffee and go into their little museum and information area. It's quite fascinating. But you can see through the entranceway there, through the gate, how lush it is. So you're now entering through the Ngorongoro Highlands, which is this, literally almost a tropical-like environment up this winding dirt road that leads you up to the edge of the very top of the Ngorongoro crater, where there are a handful of lodges that sit on the edge that look down into the crater proper. There you see the view down into the crater. And on the lower right there, the road that takes you down into the crater. So it's literally a winding mountain road, dirt road. Then once you're into the crater floor, you do a full day game drive with a picnic lunch. In the crater, the animals, particularly the zebras, are a little bit more habituated than they are to humans than they are in the Serengeti. So they'll get up a little bit closer. But you see that vehicle there. Again, that's the classic East Africa style safari vehicle, which is enclosed. They're usually a customized Land Rover or Range Rover. The top of the vehicle pops up and you stand in the vehicle and look out through the top to do your game viewing. It's really very comfortable and the East African style. The Thompson's gazelle, one of the many plains animals, the grazing animals that populate the Ngorongoro crater and the Serengeti, and his bird friend there, the name of which escapes me right now. There you see wildebeest scattered along the crater floor, grazing on the fresh green grasses. And our friends the hippos, they've just left the hippo pool and out for a walk to do a little grazing. They're one of the more fascinating creatures you see in Tanzania, and they are plentiful. And then from a photographic standpoint too, there is a lake in the bottom of the crater, and the flamingos do inhabit that lake periodically, among other bird life. And then of course you have a zebra in the foreground, the beautiful crater wall behind. It's really an amazing photographic destination. Our friends, the elephant herd, again, babies in tow, of course, always great to see those. 2 lionesses basking in the sun. A little group of zebras doing a little stream crossing there. And the elephants that are very often at the end of a safari in Tanzania or anywhere for that matter. We often ask people what their favorite animal was, and surprisingly enough, it's often the elephant. They're one of the more fascinating creatures out there. They're the way they move in families and their social structure, and they're really just beautiful animals. Another long view down into the crater. It's really quite beautiful. There you see those green grasses and the young elephant following their mom. So that was probably, that was our trip there at the end of May and early June. The giraffe, always quite fascinating, unusual creatures. They're, of course, grazing on leaves from the tops of acacia trees, their favorites. The zebras and wildebeest have a unique relationship. They hang out together and take care of each other. And then part of the experience there also is cultural. So typically in an itinerary, you will have a village visit to one of the local Maasai villages where the men and women come out and share stories, do dances, show you their fire making skills, show you inside one of their huts. And usually there'll be one of their group or one of the family members who speaks English will describe their culture, their religion, their way of life, and so forth. It's really quite interesting and beautiful people. They are the indigenous tribes in Kenya and Tanzania, dressed very colorfully. These are three elders, or 4 rather elders, hanging out again with their sticks in case they need to do some herding, and heading up to the Ngorongoro crater. Of course, coming across our friends the baboons. You find them just about everywhere. Just below the Ngorongoro crater rim is the town of Karatu, small village, small town, and there are a number of lovely farm lodges in and around Karatu that are literally farm lodges that have coffee plantations, banana plantations, avocado, corn, and so forth. And when you arrive at these lodges, almost without fail, the entire staff comes out to greet you with a drink and a song and a dance, and it's really an amazing part of the experience. The people. The extension that's most popular to a Tanzania itinerary is the island of Zanzibar. It's very, very easy to get to either on the last day of your safari or after an overnight in Arusha. It's just about an hour's flight from Arusha, either Kilimanjaro or from literally from one of your safari airstrips to Zanzibar airport. Most of our clients will stay in Zanzibar for 3 or 4 nights typically at a beach resort, of which there are many, both 3, 4, and 5-star. It's one of the most beautiful beach destinations on the Indian Ocean island, known as the Spice Island because of its multicultural history, and it's a really great way to just relax after a 6 or 7 or 10 day safari in East Africa and just kind of chill out on the beach and relax and unwind. There you see a shot of one of the beach destinations. Um, we have several Kenya and Tanzania packages on our South African Airways Vacations website. Do feel free to visit those. Luxury Tanzania is probably our most popular one. It's a fly-in itinerary that that stays in a collection of 5-star tented camps and lodges. Includes airfare from either JFK or Washington D.C. Dulles. And I've stayed in all of these camps and lodges myself. Have done this itinerary, and it's probably the classic Tanzania package. Kenya and Tanzania highlights our other extremely popular itinerary that combines both Kenya and Tanzania. It runs throughout the year. And it visits the Masai Mara Reserve, Lake Nkuru, Amboseli National Park with its famous views of Mount Kilimanjaro, Ngorongoro Crater, Lake Manyara, Serengeti, and so forth, just like we've described here. You will very likely see some part of the Great Migration, depending on what time of year you go. Amazing views of Mount Kilimanjaro. The rhino sanctuaries, where sighting of both black and white rhino are almost guaranteed. Seeing leopards as well, and then of course the Olduvai Gorge and the Cradle of Mankind, which is one of the most famous of the prehistoric sites in the world. So yes, Kenya and Tanzania highlights, and this is an overland tour where you have a private guide and move from camp to camp, lodge to lodge by safari vehicle. I'm going to hand this over to my colleague Cheryl Velser now. Thank you so much for being here and have a wonderful day.
Okay, we're not ready to let you go yet, Mark. While I'm finishing up, if you would go ahead and pop your questions into the question box, and we'll be happy to answer those. I wanted to mention that there's a lot of information on our SaaVacations.com website. I encourage you, if you haven't already done so, to register on our travel agent portal. We have a number of features that can really assist you before you make that call to us, or it'll assist you in helping you answer some of your clients' questions. And also our live chat feature. This is actually one of the most popular features we have, where agents can just hop on. It's monitored during the day, and they can ask a quick question and start the dialogue with one of our Africa specialists. And of course, we have our iBrochure. We're actually in the midst of preparing our new 2018 brochure, which should be printed toward the end of August. And of course, a little bit of a commercial. We're really easy to deal with because we're a small company. We can change things very quickly. Our quotations are usually sent out within 24 hours. Sometimes it takes 48 hours for East Africa. Our detailed proposals, we use a system that actually you can click on a link and see a virtual itinerary of the customized package that we've created for your clients. We are happy to do a conference call with you and your client to assist in closing the sale. We can just be your Africa specialist in the background. Of course, we offer webinars, which we're now recording and putting on our travel agent portal. We have, of course, the live chat feature, and a real person answers the phone when you call us. So all of our Africa specialists, we all put our cell numbers on our signatures. So if you have an emergency over the weekend or after hours, you can reach our Africa specialist. We can quote net to you. Now, on our advertised packages, you get 10% of the land portion. However, we know clients don't take anything as is, and so we encourage you to tweak the package, add nights, drop nights, change out some of the properties. Then we can quote net, and you advise us of the markup and commission you wish to add. And of course, you can earn commission on international air, on South African Airways. So we require to confirm a booking, the airfare needs to be ticketed, and 50% land deposit is required to confirm the booking, and then the balance is due 60 days prior to departure. We use EchoSign, which is one of the most secure ways to send credit card information, and also keeps it very secure. We can offer travel insurance if you choose not to sell your own. And of course, commission is sent 1 week prior to the client's travel. So we encourage you to reach out to us. There's all of our information. You can also find our information on the Contact Us or About Us on our website. And now we're going to get to some of those questions